The planning conversation starts here on the Income Protection Podcast. Here's your host, Mike Cogdall and Grayson Owen.
All right, Mike, we're back. Our good friend Alex is on the podcast today. How's everybody doing?
Doing awesome. How you doing?
We're rocking and rolling.
One of those days, you know the drill. We have to say the same thing every time. The sunshine
Yeah.
is here and it's warming up. So we've gone from season 1 to 2, hot to hotter. So let's make it happen.
We don't have that up here, guys. We don't have the hot to hotter.
Yeah. Enough of the Florida and Georgia weather. What's going on in Des Moines, Alex? How's the weather out there?
Every day is a new temperature gauge. Like we're gonna have 71 on Friday, and the next day it's gonna be 45. So that's this time of year. So we're used to it.
And it is the whole country, Alex. As my wife was just in Colorado from Wednesday to Sunday, doing some stuff with friends, and their temperatures were almost the exact same as Florida.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be the middle of ski season. Spring break's around the corner to go skiing, and it's supposed to be not 71 degrees. And then we could go to New York City, or we can go to Boston or somewhere and talk about 20 inches of snow in 24 hours and a blizzard they haven't seen in 10 or 15 years. So anyway, we can't control the weather. We just like to comment on it because they just humor me because of my age. That's what we do. They don't want to hear my medical problems, so we have to talk about weather instead. So anyway, let's roll today, gentlemen. Let's get this thing kicked off.
So today, as I said, we got our good friend Alex Wesdorf back on the podcast. He's our regular guest. And I will also add, I think besides our first episode, Alex's episode from last year is our most listened to and most downloaded episode. So there you go, Alex.
It's because I listened to it 50 times. I like to hear my voice, apparently.
Way to go. Way to
There
go.
you go.
That's what I would do too.
There you go. All good. So today we have one of our favorite topics of the year, which we're giving a review of the LIMRA numbers. We just got those for the end of 2025. So we're going to report on those. And to kick it off, Alex, we'd love to hear from you. What were your initial thoughts after reviewing some of those numbers? And what do you think of the overall DI industry right now?
I think what was really interesting is that the employer paid executive benefits was up year over year. And I think that's really interesting. And given a year where you talk to these medical brokers and the renewals at these companies on the medical insurance side is an absolute nightmare. We still saw growth in that segment of the industry with predominantly 2 carriers. But I think that is very interesting and something to watch for because I know that other carriers are trying to really dive deeper into that marketplace. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what that looks like with executive carve-outs for these companies.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I noticed that too. And on the employer paid GSI side, you could certainly see where some of the carriers were improving and whatnot. So that's good. And I think that's actually a huge takeaway, especially compared to the fully underwritten side of the business.
Yep.
Alex, I have a question for you on that really quick. We talk about year over year growth on executive carve out and its guarantee issue. Doesn't it beg the question then, or at least something that is, if you're a giant company that's all over the United States of America, so you're in Seattle, you're from Seattle to Rochester, New York, and you're writing somebody $8,000 a month, and you don't underwrite it, and you're really happy with that. Why do we underwrite the heck out of people that are getting $4,000 a month to this day? Just a question is, if any carriers are out there listening today, it's just a question I have. And Alex, I want your response versus mine because everybody knows what I'm going to say. Why do we do so much information? What's the difference between the executive in Rochester and one of your buddies living in Des Moines, Iowa? What's the difference? This isn't workman's comp, as a friend once told me. It's not work comp insurance. Why are we working so hard on this to make it difficult for everyday run-of-the-mill citizens to get it? What's your take?
So I had the same question when I was at the carrier that you were formerly employed at as well, because I would say, hey, we're going to give this guy $15,000 and he's 61 years old. Don't we get a little bit nervous about that guy going out from a heart attack stroke just based on age alone without knowing his medical concern at all? And I think 2 things are true. One, law of large numbers. So you're getting at least 5 people and you're hoping that all 5 of the 5 at minimum from one of these carriers is not going to go on claim. But at least you'll get the premium from the other to potentially offset. But I still don't think that makes any sense because these things don't cost very much, right, to implement, especially at 5 lives. So I don't know the answer because we're making it very difficult on the underwritten side for someone who's 35 to go get $10,000 versus the 61-year-old getting $15,000 and there's no medical concern at all. But I think it's asking a question that's not being asked in the marketplace. And so carriers are looking at, again, just ease of doing business. And this is kind of ease of doing business. You're census enrolling these people. There's no medical questions. You're gathering premium that you probably don't get because they're not getting asked the question. So maybe there's, a couple of things there.
Well, I think maybe there's a happy medium somewhere, because if you've got 5 lives is incredible as well. And why would you not ask a single question of anybody and then take that premium and make it less expensive instead of more? To this day, I just question not the whole industry, because the industry's been very good to you, me, and Grayson so far in our careers, and mine's been a lot longer than yours. So I love the industry and I'll never get out of it. But I do think that it's time in 2026 to start looking at things just through a different lens, for lack of a better term.
I think that, and obviously this is an insurance term, so offering that level of coverage, even $4,000 a month to the general public, they're clearly concerned about what we know as adverse selection. But to your point, Mike, the GSI market is kind of that to some extent, or could be subject to that as well. The only difference is that these carriers are taking what they consider a better risk on their paper, because it's tied to a company and it's identifying their high earners and it's a mandatory plan. So they believe that those two things, having a high earner, making it a mandatory plan, helps spread the risk a little bit. And I would probably also think from a medical risk standpoint, they might assume that high earners at companies perhaps have better access to healthcare and might be doing more preventative care. I don't know if that's true or not, but maybe that's their thought process, whereas they have no way to take tabs on that with the general public. So they must think that this is a more calculated way. But to your point, I think if you had certain segments of the market that were offered at least a low amount, does that really change the overall experience on the block of business long term? That's a question that, would only be able to be answered if a carrier went down that path.
I think time will tell. I mean, a lot of these carriers are on the infant stage when it comes to executive carve-out stuff, where they're really focusing on it, right? We're seeing a growth year over year. I mean, what was the number? 50 million last year in sales. Unum was always known as the GSI king, and now you've started to see Principal, Standard, Guardian, really dive deeper into these programs. So I think you got to give it 15 years too. I don't think they know what they have yet.
Yep. Yeah, and I think they could also take a look at all the carriers who are in the voluntary market and how are those performing as well. I know it looks like MetLife had a very considerable size, a large case this past year or two, because their numbers went up quite a bit. Mass Mutual has a voluntary product. Most of the carriers are pretty selective from the RFPs that I've run on voluntary GSI. So interesting. But I think, to answer the question, maybe they need to go look at their voluntary plans first and see how those are performing.
Well, in the voluntary space, didn't Met increase significantly, like really big?
Yes. Yeah. It's my understanding there was a very dramatic increase in voluntary GSI sales.
So that even answers the question further, is, what voluntary means that if I'm sick, I'm most likely going to buy. So we still have this adverse selection thing. And I'm talking about the everyday run-of-the-mill population. Again, it's not workman's comp. It's individual disability insurance. In the event you get hurt or sick. And as I always tell people, I just had a friend of mine who's a doctor who just got diagnosed with Parkinson's. So it's probably going to be tough to be an orthopedic. That can happen to anybody. You can be a doctor, lawyer, CPA, plumber, fireman, whomever, and you can get Parkinson's. So, I mean, that's kind of where we are, is like, they always we try to pigeonhole something, like even in some of these doctor programs. Let's talk about that for a second, because it's growing immensely, especially in the resident space. I think you guys would agree. What's the difference between a resident at the University of Rochester and one at UCLA?
Nothing.
So, we have to have so many of these, or we're not going to do the case. We have to have a percentage. What's the difference? Right. I'm getting to the point where I look at the LIMRA numbers, I go, you should just write everybody. Just tell everybody they have a discount if that's what you're trying to do. I mean, I'm not exactly sure where we're trying to go. What's the focus? And LIMRA really spells that out, I think, pretty well, don't you guys? Because look at the everyday, and Alex, you've already mentioned this to me offline or before we started this morning, about number of just everyday run-of-the-mill underwritten disability insurance. Where are we with the numbers? And try to throw docs out of there. Just take the residents out if you can, and look at the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, if you take out that guaranteed issue program that we're talking about in the resident space, the industry percentage-wise is way down. The percentage of applications or policies written last year was down. Even though we have a growth in premium in that non-can space, we know that GSI plays a role into that space, both employer paid and voluntary, especially in the medical resident space. And so what the story really is continuing to show is you're not having the conversation outside the medical marketplace. That's what it looks like to me. If you're writing less policies but a little bit more premium, and most of that premium is coming from the medical resident space with one carrier, less people are having this conversation with people outside of the medical world.
Yeah, I think if you look at policy count, though, if you think to kind of add on what you're saying, Alex, you take out the medical GSI market, you take out the executive GSI market out of the equation, you have two carriers that are having the conversation because you can look at their policy count, and that's Northwestern Mutual and State Farm. They have very high policy count numbers compared to the other carriers from what I looked at.
And Grayson, why do you think that is? I mean, we both have an opinion, but what's yours?
I think that for those two carriers, they are regularly bringing up income protection as part of the plans that they're putting on the table, whether that's a financial plan. I know Northwestern Mutual does a lot of financial planning. They also have insurance-focused producers. And then State Farm is mostly insurance risk management planning. And so they're having the income protection conversation more times than brokers of these other carriers. That's the bottom line.
I think it's just a lack of training, right? I think the Northwestern is notorious for training their new advisors on risk management first and foremost, and the other carriers are not. And I think and I get why. Like, I understand that assets under management pays the bills, but I mean, the reason you see a 90% fail out of this industry is because they only search for the whale, for the AUM, and they don't actually do what's best for their contemporaries around them. If you're a 23-year-old advisor and you don't write any insurance product on your friends who probably need BI, they're not going to make it in the business anyways. And so these other carriers, if they're not training their people, they're a career force. And that's what we see is like that number is just way down.
And so I think what you're both saying is the solution is, again, training and education. And this is, let me sidebar this a little bit. That's why we talk incessantly about this broker program. If you're not going to do it and you are out there doing RIA, fee-based, I don't care what it is. It doesn't really matter. AUM only, pure financial planning, regardless of what you do. The need for disability insurance, income protection, as we like to call it still exists. So if you're not going to do it, you know what? Reach out to somebody that can and will do it for you, because the client's need does not change. And the LIMRA numbers are bearing that out. You would think that we're in double-digit unemployment, high double digits, like 20% unemployment in this country, by what our numbers reflect, from workforce population to number of people that actually own individual disability insurance. Take that as a sidebar. I just looked up yesterday, you know what, COBRA, most people don't even know what COBRA is or stands for. But when you lose your health insurance, family of four, I used your state, by the way, Alex, for the heck of it. State, which is Iowa. State, family of four, the approximate premium is somewhere around 18, I think they said, to $2,200. And that's AI. It could be off. I don't know. But think about $24,000 a year that you're going to have to pay for medical insurance. And you have a group LTD plan at your employer, and you have 60% of that. And now let's say it's $5,000 a month and $2,000 is already gone to your COBRA. See, there's always room for this individual policy, is my point. Somewhere out there, someplace, LIMRA is telling us. It's giving us data. Everybody says, we love data. Well, here's our data, guys. It's telling us that nobody owns this. And even everybody that works in an organization and has employer-sponsored health insurance should at least have an individual to cover what? The COBRA cost, just in case.
I think what's the most interesting thing about this LIMRA data, and we've already touched on this, is that the only increases we see in the marketplace are the places where there's no medical underwriting. That's it.
Well, and we don't even see the real numbers. And that's a very, very good point, Alex, because we all know that a future purchase option or an automatic increase on a policy is considered what?
New business.
So that goes down on the bottom line as first year premium. Yep. So we don't know. Let's assume that number's 20 or 25%. Let's just make it 20 and then take it off the overall number. And it's like, we got a lot of work to do, gentlemen.
So the real question that you're identifying there is how much of the new business premium is fully underwritten first application business that's subject to full underwriting. That's an interesting question. If we had that number, I think you're right. We would be like, wow, that's not as much as it should be. Mike, you just said something interesting. Looking at these numbers, it makes you think that, we have staggering unemployment, almost like there's less working Americans or no one's getting their income insured. I'd like to kind of pivot the conversation to the business market a little bit, because if we look at the business products, it makes you wonder, like, do we really have 30 million small businesses in the United States? Because the low numbers of products sold, it's like incredible in my opinion. I know we've talked about this, but yeah, those numbers still low. Some of them are just like insanely low, like in the low hundreds for total industry product sales. And with having tens of millions of small businesses out there, I'm not sure what to make of this, but nobody's listening out there.
I think what's really interesting about the business products is that you think of buy sell coverage in Key Man, right? Key Man, I think what was $516,000 in total premium because there's 2 carriers that sell it. But you know what's interesting is that Key Man, whenever you bring up Key Man, everybody knows Key Man life insurance. Every advisor knows that. And when you bring up a buy sell, everybody knows that you have to fund a buy sell. Yet these numbers are staggeringly so low, which means that many plans have 0 disability component for their buy sell.
No, great point. I'm actually moderating a upcoming webinar for International DI Society where we have 2 different solution providers or carriers coming on a panel discussion to talk about key person DI and how it can be sold in tandem with key person life. So great point, Alex. I think that if you're a producer listening and you're looking for the easiest entry point into the business market to sell more DI and you're doing key person life already, it's the same concept, different risk that you're insuring. Would that be fair to say, Alex?
Yeah. I think it's the Swiss Army knife of our industry for the DI side because you can use it as a buy sell if you really want to. If you want to get, like, if you have a smaller company, like key person will get your money sooner than a buy sell policy will. So, like, there's different ways to structure that. So,
Alex, it's truly just a bag of money that when it comes to your organization, you choose what to do with the money. I've seen people use it as a severance package where somebody got hurt or sick and couldn't work anymore. And they bought a 180-day disability plan to save a little money and then did a full annual salary for key person. After 180 days, they got enough to cover them for, that year. And so there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. Buy, sell, and key person. If nothing else, every single person that has a partner should look at this stuff. Every single person that has a partner. If you've got $1 million, the 3 of us have $1 million each in a company. If nothing else, if we don't want to spend all of our money on insurance, we should each get at least 25% in the world of key person or buy sell. So we can at least start a down payment. Because Alex, if you go out, I don't want to work with your wife. I don't even really know her.
Right.
I'm not going to be honest about it. I don't. I mean, she's probably the greatest human being on earth and a great mom, but she doesn't do your business.
Right.
So let's just talk about what reality is, we get $250,000, give you $250,000. We get started then we can figure out how to pay you the rest we owe you later. At least we get started we're just not in the hole. Grayson and I aren't in the hole. We have our head above water that way. So there's a million ways. Overhead expense is the exact same thing. Everybody thinks of overhead expense as just brick and mortar. You know how many remote staff people there are in the country right now that are making, I'll make up a number, $5,000 a month with benefits, working out of their home, and they live in Minot, North Dakota, and their boss is in Raleigh, North Carolina? Lots. That's $75,000 right there overhead that people just don't think about. I mean, so why would you not? And we all know the cost of overhead on a cost per thousand. It's pretty attractive insurance.
Well, I think he personally, you get 3 times your income, right? Up to $1 million with some carriers. I think that, to go replace somebody, it's going to cost more, right? To go attract them from a different company. So you can use some of that money. But I think the severance package is also a really good play there to say, hey, I really care about you. You're out. Your salary is $100,000. Here's $100,000. You can use the remainder $200,000 to, again, do whatever you want, but you can go recruit that guy. Then he's replace the guy that's going out.
What a way to create a multi-life discount among carriers. Take medical professions out of this for a second. I got 4 people working for me. I get 2. I buy an individual on myself. Not going to buy individual on them, but I buy a couple of key persons. I've now got a 3 life list bill discount.
Yep.
Configuration of policies, as long as I got 3 lives. And 100, I've got a very loyal employee now that knows in the event they ever get hurt or sick, seriously, that they've got at least 1 time salary coming for sure.
Yep.
Or 2 times or 3 times or whatever the number would be. If you really look at the numbers, it comes off the bottom line. It's a P&L item, right? It's off your expenses. It just becomes part of your business, just like your property casualty insurance. It's not a sinking fund that you just go, God, I can't afford to pay this year.
Right.
So, I mean, the LIMRA's telling us we got a lot of work to do here, guys. Really is. I mean, the future's bright. For anybody that wants to be in this business, I'd say the future's as bright as it's ever been. Wouldn't you, Grayson?
I would say, yeah. And even though this podcast, we're really crunching the numbers here, but the reality is that now is the opportunity. So that's what this highlights, is that there's never been a greater opportunity to go build your DI practice.
Well, couldn't agree more. I don't think this is negative at all, my friend. I think this is anybody listening, you can do this. I mean, and again, we're psychologically, I talk to a lot of people about all kinds of things, but this is the time, as they say, this is your moment. We're getting to March Madness, guys. Anyway, this is your time. We can help you. We can help you do this. Feel free to reach out to any of us. I mean, I'll gladly talk to you. I talk to an awful lot of people on the phone and say, this is all you need to do. So it's not doom and gloom by any stretch. It's I've said this 50,000 times. It's the road less traveled.
I also think that it's a differentiator, right? Like I've always said this to the advisors out there, like, how are you going to win business? Because everybody has their systems. Maybe they like you better than the next guy, but like, why not come in with a review of income protection to say, hey, if you make $400,000, what do you do if you can't work? I don't know. My advisor hasn't done that for me. Okay, well, that's your in, right? That's going to be your in, because in the world of technology, if you work for all these big, box companies, they all have technology and systems and all these things for you and AI and all this crap. So you got to figure out a way to differentiate yourself. The LIMRA data is showing that is a way to do that. You can come in there from a risk protection plan. And again, the reason those executives are buying it is because they're getting pitched for the first time and they don't have to do underwriting, but they're getting pitched for the very first time. The doctors are going to buy it. The dentists are going to buy it in school. We know that. But again, that's what, 5% of the population?
Yep.
Maybe. It's just unlimited opportunity. And today I would ask one thing from our podcast today. Those that listen, do 6 degrees of separation. If you know somebody that is in financial services and doesn't do it, just mention to them this podcast and say, listen to this LIMRA study. Because if you're not selling income protection, there are people that can do it for you, and you have a lot of choices to make. Find somebody that you can establish a relationship with so that your client can still be taken care of. As I've always said, give that client the opportunity to say yes. Being totally unaware of a product they know nothing about doesn't give them the opportunity to say yes.
Well said. Well said. Well, we'll leave it there for the day, gentlemen. Alex, thanks for coming on the show again. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Alex, greatly appreciate you. Thanks.
Good to see you, boys.
All right, Grayson, be well. And remember, financial planning starts with a risk protection package first.
And your clients are counting on you. See you on the show next time.
All right, my friend, be well.